is an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Awaken, chapters 16 and 17. In these highly eventful chapters, it turns out that Dr. Spears is a fucking alien. And I gotta be honest with y'all, I don't know what to make of it. I don't know what to do with it. I genuinely don't know where to go with that. And secondly, Jordan gets to be really badass, and it's super, super fun to read about. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Heather for commissioning this episode. Heather, if you are out there, thank you for your flexibility. There was an error with my booking thing, my software, as usual. That shit just keeps malfunctioning. So I am here recording on a Saturday because she had booked for a Friday and it just didn't save that, but it definitely charged her money. This is not the first time that's happened, and I'm sure it won't be the last. These two chapters, first of all, I went a little over 50 pages. It really is about like 61 pages, but there wasn't a good spot to break it. And I just felt like the remainder of this book, I think, is going to be a tad under 50. So it'll be fine. I just have to make sure to stay on top of my time here. And so much happens. There's really, I'm going to have to be like on top of my shit. So, chapter 16, and luckily, while this is a pretty long section, it can be summarized pretty quickly. Jordan is freaking the fuck out, understandably, because everything that has happened has come to light and she is aware of the threat that Brian is under. So she goes running out to locate him because all of the calls to his cell phone have been ignored, which is very unlike him because, like, apparently they were able to scan whether or not his phone was in range of a cell tower, whether it was powered on, like, all of the reasons that would make sense as to why he might not pick up under other circumstances have been discounted. So as far as she can tell, something is up. They might have gotten him already. And she is tearing through traffic at a pace that is just putting everybody else in the car like they're ready to throw up or cry. And she is not interested at all in their whining over it. At one point, Briar, he's really the primary complainer here, unsurprisingly. But at one point, Briar is like, he's not worth this. And she's just like, be quiet. And there's a really great moment. Actually, I'll get to that in a second. First, I want to just talk about Jordan's feelings on this because this is what I sort of predicted last time. Jordan is in that position where she's like, I understand why Stevens did what he did. I can't say that were I in his shoes, I wouldn't have done the exact same shit. But I am still pissed AF. And I can't just let that go. So she's not exactly angry at him in the kind of like, how could you sort of way. She's angry at him in that impotent, helpless way that you are when somebody did something to hurt you, but you completely get where they were coming from. And so you can't, like, there's a simultaneous sort of guilt and understanding that's coexisting with the rage. And it just makes it in some ways worse, you know? And I just appreciated her being willing to be like, all right, look, if it was my own person, like my mom that got her hand smashed under a fucking cast iron pan, probably I would have been willing to give up his people. I can't, like, pretend that I'm immune to that sort of coercion. So this is, they park like 2 blocks away from his building. They have made a couple of attempts to contact him unsuccessfully. And once they actually, like, get to the alley, she takes off ahead of the rest of her people. And behind them, we have Briar again, making trouble. That bitch will be the death of us. We should have let Lincoln drive and left her at the airport. Chance and Douglas exchanged looks, and the former grabbed a black duffel. Ease up on her, Briar. This is her fiancé. I know the concept of monogamy and love is something you don't believe in, but pretend this once. And Briar says, maybe if you forgive the 200 pounds I lost to you on the Liverpool match. And Douglas almost loses it here. Comes real close. He spins around and he grabs Briar by the front of the shirt. And it takes a second before he's able to calm down and be like, okay, debt forgiven. Can we please get moving here? But that does not prevent Briar from reaching down once Douglas's back is turned and picking up a little section of pipe and sliding it up his sleeve, because he doesn't know that Douglas isn't going to fucking snap on him again. And that's our first indicator. We have known that Briar is a scumbag, but it has felt most of this time like he's a scumbag in like a way that is extremely selfish and exploitative, and no doubt he has like raped women. I have no doubt of that, especially once we find out an additional power that he has. I'm pretty sure we didn't know about this. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Heather. But this is the first moment that you really see that he is about to be willing to like hurt his alleged teammates. And it's not like hurt in self-defense in the way like, oh, my teammate went AWOL and I had to do something. He started this shit because he's being a dick. So he is willing to like poke and prod at everybody and then lash out when they react to him. And it's just, it's a signal. It's a whole different level of scummery that the previous shit he had been doing is, one could say, like more on a personal level, but this is like a professional level that is different. And it's like, actually, probably that's not like exactly fair, because the women that he has no doubt assaulted, it's all unclear because we don't know the exact circumstances of like what went down allegedly versus what he is saying happened versus what the captains are saying. But as readers, we're pretty certain that the women recruits that were put through their paces initially were first ground down by, what's his face? Is it Shaw? Who's the guy who like hates women? And him assaulting them and being able to like throw that on their character that they like were after him is an additional piece of firepower for them kicking these women off the team. And these women may have been excellent teammates, and he was squandering that because he like has a power issue. And as we see later, there's like some weird like inferiority complex and anti-capitalist like vibes in there, which like the anti-capitalist shit 100% can get behind. But it's just really funny because it's so misplaced that you're just like, guy, I want to be on your side in a vacuum on like this general principle, but you're completely misapplying all of this. So when I say that this is the first time he has acted in a way that is like professionally questionable, that's not actually true at all. It was professionally questionable to begin with, but it was seeming like it didn't have an effect on the team, and actually it did. And also, it just undermined everybody's trust in him because it seems like people sort of are aware of what is going on with him, but his ability is so valuable that they're just looking past that. And it's frustrating because I really want to believe that there is another reader out there with abilities like him, that he is replaceable. But we haven't seen them yet, so whether they're out there is sort of irrelevant at this point. I'm getting ahead of myself though here. So this is a moment where they are heading out and Briar says to Douglas, if you actually had a chance of bagging her, I'd understand this whole knight in shining armor thing. As it stands, you've got no chance unless you let the Russians put to her man. And this is one of those things that it's so revealing about the man who takes this sort of stance. And I've seen this before. I think all women have seen this sort of thinking before, and probably plenty of men have, who are decent guys, have been on the receiving end of it, where a shitty man who cannot fathom treating women like human beings simply because we are, he genuinely does not understand a man being supportive of women unless the reward at the end of that is pussy. That it's as simple as that. These guys, they are never good dudes because that is what they are. They are good dudes, in quotes, on the surface because they are trying to get something out of the woman in question. So when they see a man who actually is decent, and the guy doesn't have a chance of fucking the woman, they completely short circuit because they can't process that kind of motivation of just genuinely. And I have seen this shit on the internet a bunch of times, and it's just wild to me because these dudes really think they are saying something about the guy they're attacking, when in fact it's just reveals everything about how they see women. And I mean, you'll see these comments all over the place where a dude's sticking up for a woman and some guy replies to him, "I hope she reads this, dude." As if to say, the only reason a dude would ever stand up for a woman is because he's trying to impress some bitch he's trying to fuck. And that's all it is. And it's just because you can only function at that sort of weirdly transactional level does not mean that everybody else lacks humanity in that same way. Call me crazy. It's the same sort of principle that makes it wild to men when a man stands up for a woman who isn't fuckable. If a woman is older or overweight or unattractive in some way, and a guy stands up for her, other men who just see women as an item that is whether either in the desirable column or not desirable column, they can't understand. But she's not in the desirable column. Why are you doing anything on her behalf? What? Why? And it's just... that's what women mean when we say we're being treated like objects. A lot of times it's sort of seen when we say that as objectifying in the simple moment of looking at us or commenting on our appearance. But it's not just about that. It's this sort of thing that reduces us to a fuckable object. It's a goal to reach, and that's all we are. And it makes total sense, his behavior on all points later on in these chapters. So to summarize what happens here is Jordan, she gets told that their backup team that's going to finish sort of scanning everything is going to be another half hour, and she can wait to move in or she can move in herself, and they will defer to her judgment on this. And of course she isn't planning to wait. It's just no question. So she goes in, crashing through the fucking, skylight, and it's a really dramatic entrance, and it's the kind of thing, and I was sort of wondering about this as the scene unfolded, and I realized, she's gonna go crashing into whatever's going on, and depending on how she chooses to do this, she's gonna reveal to her fiancé what she is. So what's that like? And indeed, that is the fallout of this. She goes crashing in, and it turns out he's just in the middle of a really long meeting. There's a bunch of takeout containers on the table. His phone has been silenced, and so it just says 30 missed calls. And she says, in her thoughts, it says something like she was irritated that the only reason he had missed his calls was because of his carousing. And I was like, I don't know about carousing. Yeah, his speech is slurred because he's been drinking, but he's been at work. I don't feel like that counts. But she's irritated and embarrassed, so she's definitely projecting a little bit here. And they get some privacy in a room together, and she uses a couple of like these like little disc-shaped objects that sort of disrupt signals, and turns on the tub and the faucet and does all of these things to ensure that they won't be overheard. And then she explains to him about her abilities. And I was really pleased about how this went, because, you know, initially when she does her disappearing and reappearing, first of all, can I just applaud this author for not drawing this shit out? How many times have we watched somebody try and convince a person of their supernatural ability, or of their like ability to use magic, whatever, and they haven't just demonstrated something immediately. They try and convince them, and then are surprised when they're just like, storytelling isn't strong enough. And it's like, you could make a fireball appear in your hand right now. Why don't you just do that? And thank God. She tells him that she's like a superhuman. He's like, okay. And she's like, all right. And she just disappears in front of him. There's a moment after she reappears where she takes a step toward him, and he sort of like takes a step back for a second, and it's a painful moment where she's genuinely like, fuck, does he see me as dangerous now? But he gets over it pretty quickly. All credit to Brian here, and she even says this, he was somebody who just adapted so quickly and immediately just starts asking questions like, what about your family? Are any of them superhuman? Do they know about you? How many other people are aware? Is that who you're working for? All these questions that she just doesn't have time to answer right now. But once it begins to become more clear how serious this all is, and she explains to him that there are people that are after her, he starts to finally like listen to her recommendations a little bit more, because at first when she was explaining that they needed to get him the fuck out of here, he was like, well, I have a security detail. I'll be fine. And she's like, they're not going to be able to handle these people. So once she reveals what she is, she can fully explain, these are like shark men who have abilities and strength and organization beyond anything you've seen. Your people can't. They just can't. And then he starts to be like, so how does nobody know about this? This is like a massive cover-up. People deserve to be aware that there are folks out there who can do this sort of thing. And on the one hand, because he says, like, when she suggests that wouldn't be great for people like me, he sort of argues with her and is like, there's a way to do it properly where, you know, it wouldn't endanger people. This is when you start to get into X-Men territory, though. Is there a way to do it properly? You know, like, human beings are not great at being different from one another in very basic, simple ways. We can be alike in practically every way except skin color. And that's too much. We can't handle it. How in the fuck are you going to tell people not to worry that we have like half shark men out here running around? Like, I don't see it. I'm just saying. I get your impulse here, Brian, and you're a good-hearted man, and I understand the thought behind it, but I don't agree, buddy. I just don't. I just don't have as much faith in people, you know, like, especially after everything that has gone down the past few years. It's just at an all-time low. And I do love, too, that her confessing what she is comes from him realizing that she isn't wearing any climbing gear, so how did she come through the skylight? He's just really observant, you know, like, other people might not have put that together. And the fact that he notices that, I was just kind of like, good for you. And in the end, Jordan sort of gets him to stop spinning his wheels by being like, you trust me, right? Please just trust me on this, at least for now. And then we go to Dr. Spears. And I think, Heather, in the chat last time, you had said something comparing Dr. Spears to Tony Stark. And, like, I had been considering him similarly just because of the nature of the software he was using and the kinds of like motion-based interactive 3-dimensional like user interface that he had. But once I got to this section and we hear about like where he lives and the state of like his fame in the world, that really made sense, the Tony Stark thing. Like, because earlier, as much as like he is wealthy and attractive, I didn't really know how much of a profile in our universe he had. You know, it was like, people can be extremely wealthy and kind of fly under the radar despite that. Being a celebrity doesn't necessarily have to go with wealth. And so I was sort of like picturing him as a kind of a sleeper, like rich, you know, the kind of person that you wouldn't recognize, but then they like roll up in a Bentley and you're like, oh, okay. But no, he is very Stark-like in that he has this huge skyscraper, tallest building in Los Angeles. His penthouse is like the top 3 floors. He's fully aware that it's like a little bit almost like vulgar to show off his wealth like this, but he literally like can't help himself. And he has been given all of these humanitarian awards, and we see in his like apartment on the walls are hanging photos of the children that he subjected to these experiments, which he has no problem having as a reminder, because in his opinion, he didn't do anything wrong. He sees this as having given them the opportunity to be the best version of themselves that they could be, which is wild. You know, that's one of those things where I'm just like, what is it like to be so unaffected by guilt? You know, we like the average person is plagued with guilt over many things that aren't even their fault. So what is it like to be somebody who something is genuinely your fault and you still just don't really care? It just doesn't really bother you. Like, you know, and as we find out, he's not a human being. So it begins to make a little bit more sense how completely disconnected he is from human emotion. So he comes home and he tells Jenna to start up some Tchaikovsky and handle his lights. And there's no response. And he's like, what the fuck? And then this man's voice comes out. Your toy won't hear you, fourth cast Vondre. I don't know if I'm saying his name right. Mentally, I kind of was thinking Vander, which I like a little bit more because Andre feels like weirdly effective, or affected, and Vander like Andre and Vondre. I don't like it. Vander just sounds so ordinary in a way, and that was why I liked it a little bit better. But I might just not, you know, it might be neither. So this guy steps forward, and the way he's described, he looked away from the picture wall as a tall and very gaunt man who looked of African descent walked into view from the dining area. The man had a clean-shaven pate that bore an elaborate tattoo that looked like bolts of lightning along the left-hand side of his head. There was absolutely no facial hair except for 2 thin black eyebrows hung low over very pale gray eyes. An off-white suit clung to his tall, lanky frame, and the cut of it only made him look taller and thinner. This guy sounds like he looks awesome. I really want to see, like, you know, who would be cast for this role. And he has basically he's got muscle with him, who looks German, has a blonde ponytail and beard, and really just like a huge dude squeezed into a dark suit. And I had no idea what to make of this when he calls him like fourth cast. And I was like, cast like India? Like that caste system? But I don't think they're called first, second, and third. So I was just scrambling like, what does this mean? And he's so famous that why would it have taken this long for anybody to have found him on Earth when he has a literal building that has his name on it? Like, all of this just didn't make any sense. And it is revealed that he was part of a trip that was supposed to be, apparently like human beings were the pet project of like his people's, Spears's people's enemies. And so they were sent, him and some others, and a science master whom he kills. And they've been dead for like, it sounds like thousands of years now. This guy has been around since the beginning, since humans' infancy is the way it is said. They were supposed to come down and just destroy humanity. And he decided to try and awaken humanity and rule them. But what he tells Talmar is that he was trying to awaken human beings so that they can be used as an army for the Genagyr. I don't know if I'm saying that right. It's Jenagyr. And this makes me sort of wonder if, like, the name of his assistant being Jenna is significant at all. I don't know if that's, like, an accidental thing. I might not be pronouncing it right, so it might not be connected at all. But I really enjoyed seeing Spears sort of brought low for a second. It does not last, and I didn't really want it to last because these guys sound like they suck. But Spears also sucks, you know? So I was kind of in, like, a no-win here. But this whole thing is meant to be like they had been looking for him, or, you know, it's sort of unclear to me. Ooh, sorry guys, this thing fell over. It's sort of unclear to me whether or not they had been actively looking, or if they accidentally like stumbled upon a signal that caused, that caused them to further investigate things, because how long he's been down here, I'm sort of surprised that they weren't able to do further, like that they weren't able to zero in on him a little bit sooner, you know? Thousands of years. I mean, these people, it says at one point that they have like long life expectancies, but if they aren't of a certain level of like intelligence and ability, that they will be sentenced to work in places that will dramatically reduce their lifespan. What does long life expectancy mean though? Like, is that thousands of years? Is the fact that he has been missing for thousands of years the equivalent to, you know, somebody being missing 10 years for us, where it's like, it sounds like a long time, but really, you know, it's only a blip in somebody's lifespan. I don't know. But Spears is like shaking. He really did not expect to be found, it feels like. And he has a security system in place that he can trigger with this remote. So what he decides to do, and I've already mentioned him telling this story to Talmud about how he's actually awakening human beings so that we can use them as an army of our own. He shows them some imagery from World War II, and he does this in order to distract both Talmar and his muscle. Which just goes to show how bad his muscle is. Because that's like the thing that you don't do. You don't look at the thing your boss is looking at. You watch everybody else and let your boss look at the thing. Because your job isn't meant to be part of like the conversation. But he's not doing his job very well. Also, the fact that he took the name Spears was meant to be like a specific jab at the second cast, who are like the warrior cast. But yeah, he shows them this imagery of violence because he's aware they are an extremely warlike people. And that is going to really not only attract their attention, but also make humanity a little bit more interesting to them. And Spears even sort of takes credit for how warlike humanity is. And says a couple things about how he's like led them along the way, which he sounds like the literal devil. I don't know what to think. I genuinely don't. Nearly every invention of note has either sprung from warfare or been turned to that purpose later. And as we hear from, like, you know, his sort of recounting of what it is like to grow up on his homeworld, it's all indoctrination. There's barely any actual education happening. They're being brainwashed. It feels very Russian, honestly, in a lot of ways. And taught to fight, and that's kind of it. So he's got them sort of frozen in place watching this imagery, and he has his remote in his hand, and he's typing in all sorts of stuff frantically, sort of figuring out the exact, like, where in the room to direct these strikes that he's about to initiate. And this is wild. Spears viciously stabbed his thumb down on the remote's enter key, and grinned as arcs of incandescent blue energy shot from the corners of the room and enveloped both Science Master Talmud and his second caste bodyguard. An agonized scream tore from Talmud's throat as a web of coruscating blue energy wrapped across his body, burning everything it touched. His pristine white suit ignited, and the face shifter device he used to hide his true appearance shorted out. Talmud's agonized features started to revert to their natural state, but any detail was quickly consumed by black ash. And I'm like, I really want to know what he looks like. And we know that Spears is out here, like, banging bitches left and right. So do they, like, I guess that face shifter just stays on even if he's naked? I really want to know, like, how that works. Is it embedded in his body? Like, how does that go? It would be amazing if, like, there began to be, you know, those, what is it called? Like the Daily Sun, you know, those rags, and they were talking about him like he's actually a lizard man, and everybody be like, oh, this again, but it was true. So these two get burned alive and disintegrate into ash, and triumphantly, Elgin Spears raised his arms aloft and thanked the creator of all for his fortune. This had been a close call. He would, of course, have to find the Science Master's vessel and deal with that before any automated signal could go out. He wouldn't waste this triumph. With a broad smile still on his face, he pulled his PDA out and tapped in a 12-digit code. So this is when Jenna comes back online, and she expresses some concern over the fact that she doesn't know what happened or why she was offline at all. And he has to, like, actively reassure her because she has enough of a personality to be kind of ashamed of herself and her, like, failure. And he's like, don't worry about it, girl. First of all, I kind of made a mess in here, so you're going to need to call some people in to clean up. These two bodies, I would like for you to, and what does he say? Coated with protectant. I think I will keep them as mementos. And I need you to run a global scan for Genagir magnetics resonance signatures. And prepare my flat in London, because I have to take off a little early due to all of this. And then make sure you remind, have Karen prepare my flat, and make sure you remind her to free up Ms. Lancaster's time. I'm in the mood for some company. So, yeah, I mean, if you are a Tony Stark type, he did sort of get to have his way with women, so maybe that is just no problem for him. And that is the end of this chapter. So that is a hell of a reveal. And is it supposed to be that awakened beings that exist that are out there are due to his influence? Or is it happening and he isn't even aware of how many people are awakening naturally? Or, like, is this the long-term effect of something that he began to put into place, like, thousands of years ago? I genuinely don't know what to think. So let me go into chapter 17. We are in the hotel, and this is the sort of cocktail celebration of the, like, culmination of successful trade negotiations. Jordan is in this like backless dress and attracting a lot of attention, and it's mentioned that she's like getting groped all over the floor, like everywhere she goes, and I just can't handle that she doesn't put people in their places repeatedly. I understand that her fiance is an ambassador and that would be a bad look for him, but I just hate this so much for her that she just has to like take it, you know? And he does like put Briar in his place, but only Briar, you know? It's just like happens so much just as she's crossing the floor to get some drinks. And if he saw Briar do it, he has to see the other people doing it. And I wanted him to like take that on a little bit as well, you know? But regardless, so all of her people are here, and Douglas is just really close to the two of them for most of the night. Briar is sort of like circling the perimeter repeatedly, and she just doesn't, like, she has a lot of misgivings about him being included at all. Young was self-serving, and his participation had been coerced. Jordan had memorized his file, and the former thief had been given the choice of working with the team for the length of his 15-year prison term or being tossed in the darkest, deepest hole that could be found. That made his reliability tenuous at best, in Jordan's opinion, and she wouldn't trust Brian's safety to a man like Young. And I think that's totally valid, you know? It's one thing to see this as, like, a better alternative, but when you've clearly got the kind of chip on your shoulder that Briar has, it is not surprising that he feels a lot more resentment towards everyone around him than he does feel like luck, maybe. Just sheer luck at his own good fortune in having been picked up to do this instead. And this is also, it's mentioned that she wanted Chance on the mission, but it says Chance had returned to the jet after a mysterious call from one of his contacts. He had assured the team that this contact would pay off, so they agreed that they would manage without him. I'm super curious about this. Is that for real, or did Chance get drawn away for, like, another reason? I hope that it's not a fucking trap or something, you know? So Lincoln, meanwhile, is just, like, kind of off and going through, it says, let's see, he was brought in to make the fourth man and was stationed outside in Brian's car to keep an escape route clear should they need it. And unfortunately, Lincoln does not make it to the end of this mission, and it's a bummer because I rather liked the guy. Unless he's the one who hates women, but I don't think so. I can't remember who that guy is. What's his name? So this is when Jordan goes over to get a refill, and Brian comes up to her, and there's a moment where she's like walking toward him, and there's a flash of light from a camera, and she loses track of him. And I thought that was the start of a trap. I sort of thought that was going to wind up being purposeful. I don't know if maybe it was, and things just didn't wind up going off at the time, because as we find out, these shark dudes are like in and amongst the catering staff, you know, they're part of the people who are carrying drinks and utensils and whatnot around. So finally, Briar comes up behind her and like grabs her ass, and this is the thing that Brian sees. I have to say, Briar and Brian is very confusing. I don't know why he picked two people's names to have that are so similarly spelled. It's really like there were a couple of times where I had to stop and go back and be like, okay, I had that wrong. I thought that was him saying it, but it was the other one. And he does this whole like, when she's like, you better move that hand before I break the arm it's attached to. And he tries to be playful. Where would you like me to place it next? I can offer a few suggestions. And she just says, my patience with your games has limits. The smile faded from Briar's face as the sincerity of Jordan's terse response sunk in. All right, just having a bit of fun, love. And it's just like, man, what about the way that she has responded to you thus far has made you think that she's fucking playing with you, dude? You know, but there are guys out there like this. They think that we're playing hard to get or something when we just want them to leave us the fuck alone. It's wild. They will tell themselves anything. So she says something about how they should head out soon or they should head out, but she has to peel her fiance away from his fans. And Briar says that one likes to talk all right. He's been working the entire room like a pro. Never trusted blokes like that myself. And I'm just like, oh, wow. You don't say. Whatever shall we do? He doesn't have your good opinion, Briar? Shut up. Who cares? But it turns out it does wind up being a bit of a thing. And she continues to sort of watch Briar, and at one point notices that he comes back into the ballroom with a spring in his step that is not explained, and it gets her attention. But after everything goes down later, it's probably going to be wiped from her mind. I don't know if she'll remember that unless it's like much later as she's putting pieces together. So this is when Brian watches Briar head into the bathroom, and he's like, you know what? I need to use the bathroom too. Can you make sure we're the only ones in there? And Douglas is sort of like, yeah, sure I can. He seems to sort of know what's on Brian's mind. And Brian goes in and is like, Briar, right? Don't you ever fucking touch her again, or I will break your teeth. And I don't give a shit who you work for. I will. I'll just do that because I said so. The end. And, like, there's a moment where Briar tries to be like, you don't know who I work for. You can't touch me. And he's like, can't you? Can't I? And sort of, like, calls his bluff in a way that I don't know if Brian is aware that Briar is disliked by so many people, but there's something about the way he says it that even makes Briar stop and be like, actually, if he, like, told them I pulled some shit, they would be really pissed and might send me back to prison. And this, like, seems to be the end of it. But whenever you deal with a man like him, Briar, in this sort of way, where you try and intimidate him, it doesn't end in that place because, like, some people, bullies, like straight up bullies, if you get in their face back, they just go looking for easier targets. But Briar has a chip on his shoulder that's really specific, and so that doesn't work with him. And when we go to his POV, Agincourt was just like every other person of means Briar had ever met. He was arrogant and had no problem using his influence to destroy someone who pissed him off. And it's just one of those moments of like, you didn't just piss him off. You groped his fiance, man. You know, like, he just doesn't think of himself as responsible for any of this in the slightest. To him, it's nothing. And his reaction to it is inexplicable. And it's just, you know, this is the fucking thing. When we downplay this sort of action and this sort of violation repeatedly, by the way, then men are genuinely puzzled when they're held accountable because everybody has acted like it's just an irritant, but not a big deal. And when somebody finally is like, you better fucking not, they're like, what? What's the big deal? Why are you overreacting? They're not overreacting. Everybody else has been consistently underreacting. And there's part of me that feels like irritated that we send this message forever and then we're surprised that, like, dudes don't know better. You know, like, he really shouldn't be on this team. I understand his usefulness, but when he is this much of a weak link, is it worth it? And that's pretty much exactly what Jordan's struggling with also, you know. And he says he wondered if the corporate executive that had let all of the workers go felt that sense of self-assured invincibility. Brian wondered if his own father had seen the same thing the day he was fired from the plant. After all, who did the serfs and peons think they were to want an honest wage that could provide for their families? And again, I stand by him in that respect, but that's not what's happening here. He's completely misapplying the thing. dudes do that. And not just men, but in this sort of scenario, whereas men being held accountable for their gross behavior toward women, they definitely turn it into all kinds of other issues beyond just you violated consent with somebody. That's it. It's that simple. But they don't want it to be that simple. They can't even see it that way. So he runs into a server holding a tray and knocks a bunch of stuff over. And as that server bends to pick some things up, Briar notices this tattoo on his wrist. And he just says, "Nice tat. Guess the Spetsnaz hand those out like candy, huh?" The waiter lunges for him and slams his forearm against the smaller man's chest. Using his extra 4 inches of height and 60 pounds of weight, the Vodnik soldier drove Briar back into the wall sharply. Light flashed off the knife's aluminum blade in the man's other hand as he positioned it to stab Briar in the heart. Then he froze in place. Briar smiled darkly and gripped the man's forearm. "Thought you were just gonna walk through me, huh?" So, again, I'm pretty sure we didn't know Briar could do this. And this is so creepy. It's like the equivalent of drugging somebody and completely robbing them of like bodily autonomy, except they're fully conscious and awake throughout. So I am assuming that he raped women using this ability, and they were fully aware of what was happening to them. And I would love to know if they tried to report that he has this ability, because again, I don't think that we knew about this. Maybe we did, and it just sort of flew under my radar. But I don't think we did. Or else his assaults might have made more sense. But if these women tried to like report him for them, I don't know how it went. You know, it's just like, I want to know more about what these women attempted to report, if they reported anything. And if they did attempt to report it, then it's the people in charge of this team that are going to be responsible for the fact that he is pulling some shit, because they didn't inform the rest of the team adequately about what he could do, and they didn't take it seriously what these women were telling about their experience, in solely because they did not want women on the team at all, which is a whole other issue. And, you know, it's the kind of thing that it seems very open and shut, but as women in the military know, you can have all the proof in the world and it doesn't fucking matter because they don't care. So I'm acting like this is going to be some sort of smoking gun in the end, but I don't even know that that's going to matter at all. And Briar goes through this guy's phone. He also takes a bunch of money off of him. I'm looking for a promotion, a position with good benefits and travel. Of course, the compensation has to be top-notch, but I'd make some concessions if I can start right away. And he stabs the guy in the heart. I was like, wait, you're killing him? But then he takes it out to let him heal. So, I don't know that we knew that these guys had this like hyper healing. Maybe we did. I don't remember. Maybe it's from the autopsy that we like figured this out. But yeah, he like does this in such a way that it's actually pretty canny, you know? Without a second thought, he shoved the Vodnik into the waiting laundry cart. The mercenary twitched and gurgled as his heart stopped circulating blood. Briar grabbed the man's wallet and pulled a thick sheaf of bills from it, folding and tucking them into his pants pocket. He pulled a pen from inside his coat and quickly scribbled an email address down on a piece of paper inside the wallet. With a casual flick of his wrist, Briar tossed the wallet into the cart with the man. "Don't forget to give this to your boss." Unceremoniously, Briar pulled the knife from the man's chest so that he would heal. He dropped the weapon onto the cart next to the man and immediately began tossing clean towels from a nearby rack on top of him. Continued until his body isn't visible, and then he upends the contents down the laundry chute. And this is when he reappears in the main ballroom, looking a little bit too pleased with himself, and Jordan notices and is kind of like, what's going on here? At this point, they decide to leave. And I thought that this was really well done in terms of ratcheting up the tension, because you know something's going to go wrong. We've already been told that one of these shark men is here. Obviously, they're planning something. And so we know that, but you would have thought they'd strike earlier. And as they move from the building into the parking garage, as they get into the car and then head out onto the road, all of this, you're feeling like, where are they? We know they're there. What are they doing? So it really did ratchet up the tension really well. And eventually we get to this spot where Briar can tell that there are people following them on motorcycles. There's this moment, too, I forgot to mention. Jordan allowed her perceptions and mental acuity to gradually ramp back up to their highest levels. Everything around seemed to slow and distort as her mind entered that state of alacritus existence. This is a word that I had not heard. And according to New Oxford American Dictionary, let's see. Like it's related to alacrity. So that state of alacritous existence. Oh, I see. Cool. It doesn't actually, like, so it's wild though, because it says alacrity, brisk and cheerful readiness. But then before that, it says alack, archaic, an expression of regret or dismay. So the two of them are actually like, they are antonyms in a way, alacrity and alack. It's wild that they like, all right, sure. So alacritous meaning just, that she can see things moving very easily at speed. All right, cool. I had never seen that word before though, so that's wild. So they realize that they are being followed. And there's a point here, I forgot to mention that Lena is here throughout all of this. And I'm just really wondering what the fuck Lena makes of what happens later. Because she has been saying that Jordan isn't right for Brian. And I can't decide if this is going to make her, like, cement that for her and make her go, do you see? Or if instead she's going to be like, oh my God, this bitch, how do I compete with that? Never mind. I fold, But she says something when they get in the car, like, I'm so glad that's over. And Jordan's like, girl, it's not. It's not. Don't say that even. So they put on vests as soon as they see these cars are following. And it becomes really clear that they all just they all being like Brian and Lena don't really understand what could potentially happen here. They just don't get it. Like Lena puts up a bit of a fight about wearing the vest at all. And it's like, bitch, just shut up for Christ's sake and put the fucking thing on. So this is when we get the chase scene, and they keep being shoved down these like side streets into areas where there's only one exit, and it's really quickly that Jordan realizes they are being herded towards a specific area, which is going to have to be a fucking trap. So they are going to need to do something really dramatic to get out of this little pen that they're being put in. And Lincoln does this like wild driving up onto sidewalks and between buildings. All of this is again very cinematic, but it's not easy to write a scene like this and have it be coherent. So I just want to give the author some props on that, because I have read books that attempt to do a scene like this and it is not like, the tension isn't quite there because they are too focused on some of the wrong things, and it doesn't move quickly enough because it gets bogged down in weird details that you're like, why did you think that was something I needed to know right now at this point when shit is really popping off? Like, wrong place to insert those kinds of details. So at this point, what's his face? The big bad shark man, Arcady, he like pops out and he's got a fucking It says, a rifle that Jordan was all too familiar with raised to his shoulder. I don't know if this is a reference to a weapon that she has used earlier in the books, or if it's just supposed to be that, like, because of the line of work she was in, that she knows this weapon. I don't know what it is. I've kind of felt like I was supposed to have gotten something from that, but I didn't. Arcady narrowed his dark eyes and sighted down the scope of the Accuracy International Arctic Warfare, which is such a goofy fucking name, and I have to assume that that is like a real weapons name. And I just... Can we stop letting 13-year-old boys name shit, please? What is that? Anyway, he pulls the trigger, and Jordan, in her alacritous state of mind, see me using it, she pulls Brian out of the way, pulls Briar out of the way because it's heading towards the front seat. The entire seat shuddered as the mechanism that locked it upright snapped under the force of Jordan's strength, which pitched Briar's upper body backward. Without waiting, Jordan leaned her upper body across Brian and met his eyes. She was moving so fast that neither man had time to register what she had done, let alone react to it. Across Brian. Sorry, see? I keep doing that. The round smashed through the glass, cut through the air where Briar Young's head had been, and slammed into the side of Lincoln's head with the force of a sledgehammer. And I was like, no. And, you know, this is bad news, not just because I would like for Briar to die, please, but also because Lincoln's driving. So this turns into a whole thing where Briar has to take over the driving. And Brian is really, like, kind of horrified at the fact that they are literally going to just shove Lincoln's body out the door onto the street and leave it behind. And there's just no choice for it, but he's being really precious about it in a moment that we cannot afford to worry about this right now, Brian. Like, buddy, you know, your future wife is a professional, and I think you need to bow to her judgment on this. And he just, like, argues about it at a time where I'm like, man, this is not the fucking place, dude. Y'all are being pursued by people using, like, rounds in the middle of the street in daylight amongst civilians. Like, what are you talking about? So this is when she decides that she is going to do her thing. And it's pretty great, guys. I love this so much. Part of it, there was a part that I feel like I had trouble picturing. So as I read it to y'all, I'm wondering if it's going to sort of like crystallize a bit more for me. So she says, if we don't end this now, we're either going to crash or they're going to hit someone else. I'm just going to give them what they want. And he says, what's that? And she says, me. She grasped the top of the door with one hand. She ignored Brian's startled shout and pulled herself out of the window. Jordan used the momentum of her exit to throw herself in a backward arc so that her body would come up and over the roof. Twisting in mid-swing, she pivoted around and landed on the roof of the speeding Mercedes facing her pursuers. Jordan moved into a low crouch. As she drew her pistol, she released the restraints on her perception and reflexes, fully entering a state of hyper-acceleration. She felt unchained, her body and mind unified in purpose and synchronization and movement. With a weapon in each hand, Jordan sprang high into the air, the twin 9mm pistols barking out shots so quickly they seemed to be firing on full auto. Her arms outstretched, the dark-haired agent looked like an angel of death as she leapt the 3 car lengths that separated the sedan from the pursuing SUVs. The pistols spat fire and riddled 2 of the pursuing motorcycle riders with bullets as Jordan swept the weapons in a wide arc. She continued to track the weapons in an ever-narrowing cone as she landed on the hood of the first SUV on one knee. The lead SUV's driver still had a stunned expression when 4 well-placed shots struck him in the heart. The last moments of his life, the passenger couldn't rid his mind of the terrible cobalt stare that the dark-haired woman gave them just before she sprang away. Keeping her body extended long and straight, Jordan spun in a 360-degree rotation several times. This is the part I had trouble picturing. She kept her arms tightly folded across her chest through 6 rotations until her path and the second escalades crossed. When the toe of her right foot touched the front of the SUV's hood, she extended her left leg and arms out to gather more momentum. At the pinnacle of her turn, she hurled both of the GSH-18 pistols in different directions. So I think that is the thing. She's like spinning in midair. The car is coming at her, like kind of like coming up underneath her as she's in midair. And then she throws the pistols and then comes landing as those pistols hit the motorcyclist. The second weapon crashed through the windshield in an explosion of glass of the Mercedes. The driver threw his hands up to shield his face, but the presence of his hands did little to protect him from the spinning piece of metal and polymer. His cry of pain evaporated in the moment it took the weapon to connect with his skull. Jordan brought her left foot down and dropped into a crouch where she perched on the front of the SUV's nose. She pushed off and threw herself into a flip just before the motorcycle and its deceased rider slammed into the front of the speeding Cadillac. The large sports utility lurched as the bike and its rider's body disappeared into the SUV's front wheels. The passenger side wheel locked up as the motorcycle's remains caught in the fender well and sent the vehicle into a sideways roll. The dark-haired agent seemed to defy gravity as she hurtled over the second SUV's bulky form toward the remaining 2 vehicles. As she came down on the hood of the last SUV, the 4th motorcycle rider brought up his compact submachine gun and opened fire. Before the first shot had even left the barrel, Jordan dropped forward and planted her palms on the hood. She snapped her foot out and kicked the rider's wrist with her bare heel, putting his weapon in line with the driver's side window. The hail of bullets struck both the screaming driver and the bald man sitting in the passenger seat. Arkady, I'm assuming, because it jumps to him. For the first time in over a decade, Arkady Maliev felt fear. True fear. Cold and raw. It was instinctual. Knowledge that what confronted you could extinguish your life. It was the fear of a death he had no means to stop. Mercy was absent in the dark-haired woman's blue eyes as she crouched on the hood. In her own way, Jordan Law was as much a predator as he was. At last he understood why Constantine was willing to pay such a high price to possess her. Amongst superior beings, such as him and Constantine, she was an equal. The driver's body jerked violently as the hail of 9mm bullets ripped into it. The motorcycle's rider was forced to drop his weapon to keep his machine upright, and Jordan took the opportunity to launch herself in the air once more. She sprung out away from the SUV like an arrow, grabbed onto the light post. She spins around it, kicks the motorcycle driver off, takes his spot. It's very, very fun. And meanwhile, I should mention, she's doing all of this in a ball gown that she has ripped up the side, of course, in a very sexy, like, it's one of those things where I want to roll my eyes, but I like it too much to be mad, you know? And I like this. She at the end of this chapter notices everybody at the back of the car that she came from staring. Let's see. All 3 of the back seat's occupants looked at her with stunned expressions, and with adrenaline singing in her blood, Jordan winked at them. Now, I'm sure that Brian is still going to be worried about Jordan and her job and whatnot, but I have to imagine that he is going to be so completely horny for her after this, right? Like, you don't watch your significant other do something this obscenely badass and you don't just go, oh my God, I want you immediately. Like, I just have to imagine that works the exact same way for men as it does for women, right? I hope. I mean, I guess that there's some, like, toxic masculine fragile men who would be like, she's more badass than me, I don't like it. But I don't see Brian being one of those at all, so I'm not worried about that. But yeah, that was really fun. So the next episode is going to be the last chapters of this book, And then I think that Heather said she wanted me to read a short story before going into the second book, or it might be between the second and third. But I don't remember. I'll have to check with Heather. But yeah, I'm really excited about seeing how this book wraps up, because like we've opened a lot of doors in these chapters in this penultimate episode, and I don't know what to expect now. So all right, I'm going to wrap up. Thank you again, Heather, for commissioning this and bearing with me with the scheduling difficulties. And I hope that you are enjoying the coverage, and I will be seeing you guys soon with a new episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.